Hi, I'm Kit Falbo. I am an author. I like to write fiction and poetry. I'm also autistic, and I like to focus on one of my focused interests is on craft of writing. And right now, I'm going to talk about the crafting of prose in fiction as a little primer of my ideas on it. Um, when you write prose, people talk about two sides. They talk about clear window prose, in which you're using more simple descriptions of this is happening, and then this, and then this, and pretty much just the facts, ma'am style of writing. And then they talk about stained glass prose, where you're being very flowery and descriptive and using metaphor. It can often dip into a weird or the strange. You know, when you think of things like Vonnegut and a few other odd things. But in truth, it's really a spectrum, and a spectrum that is not always clear cut, maybe like a three-dimensional spectrum, and because you can really go different ways depending upon what you are looking to build upon. There's no right or wrong in you choosing prose that fits the story that you are going to write, but genres do have expectations that the readers, when they open the book, it's why new weird is often considered as its own genre instead of being lumped into like horror or science fiction, depending upon how the prose versus the story goes. Um, Now, in order for prose to work, be it clear window or stained glass, you need to have a framework of ways to support it to continue your story inside the prose. If you think of your book or pieces of fiction like a house, the prose is often the first things that people see. It's like the painted walls that are in the inside of the house, while the plot, the characters, and the structures are all supporting it. But what people see in the very beginning is how your book is written, that prose that you're trying to tell the story in. Some people talk about author voice, like when an author is trying to just sticks to one kind of prose, but it's a bit more complicated than that because author voice is often how you write, and you can actually write widely variety of prose and still be the same author, depending upon what fits the story. I'm sure some writers pigeonhole themselves a bit that way. Um, but when you do pick prose, keys are consistency. Now, like a house, you can have like a funky little bathroom, like a little like special scene. Sometimes writers, in finding how they like their prose, um, do things like battles are very flowery. They have certain kinds of descriptors that they like. I mean, you always hear people talk about the food in Game of Thrones, things in other books. You can find what you like, and as long as you are consistent with that theme in the story, you can kind of get away with your own little funky little area just for fun. I mean, it's fun to write about food. It's fun to write descriptions of unique characters whenever they arise because it's often popular. But as long as you're consistent, you're pretty much good to go. Now, every kind of prose has flaws. A lot of clear window is very popular nowadays, but it tends to be dry and demotivating, and it's really not going to be a key aspect that holds people's attention in the story. You're saying these are the facts, and you're letting other aspects carry the story along. Not just the prose and the descriptions. You know, so and flaws in stained glass are often that it can get in the way of the story that you're trying to tell. It can mess up the pacing, it can be distracting. And I'm going to talk about how to improve your prose no matter what you pick or where you are in the spectrum. You know, talk primarily about things that are more clear window, and then primarily about things that are more stained glass. But all of these rules kind of like blend together into a nice little just prose. You know, it's parts that help hold up the clear window type of prose is dialogue. You think of it as like the descriptions are there just kind of like as a box, as like a play, as like a stage play. Oftentimes it's very similar. You set the scene in the words, and then you have the dialogue carry the story. It has to have meaning, it has to be punchy, it has to attract you to what's going on, and that will often hold up the clear window style of prose. You know, that's boring, but once you get to the dialogue, it's banging, you know, and you want people to focus on that dialogue. Um, the another thing is the personality of the characters. If you can get people to fall in love with the characters in the book, they're willing to go through the clear window style of prose, because what one of the things it does is it does speed up the pacing in such a way that you can kind of read through it really fast and get to the parts that focus on the characters that they like and want to see what's going to happen next. Um, Now, another thing is that you can use context. So as plain as the dialogue, as the not the as the prose is, if it is in the right context, it adds both primary context and subtext of the scene. It can add a lot of extra meaning to very simple words. Oftentimes, it's a similar setup you can use with dialogue, and that's why I got confused, or with some other aspects of your story. As long as the context is there, that you've laid down the proper groundwork, it can be your prose can be very plain yet very engaging at the same time. Um, you can also still use little bits of more colorful prose. Uh, in and you really want it to be small bits if you're focusing mainly on that. Things that are for foreshadowing or a theme. You might only do the colors of outfits for reasons, either sociological or political or thematic, red for death or black or white. Well, really, as long as you're consistent with your theme, you are in a very good place with having that clear window prose and drawing the eye of the reader to the aspects of the foreshadowing using more purplish stained glass prose in your story. Now, for stained glass, in which everything is kind of like an earthly, tumultuous mix of soup and spices and everything, and what you want to do is you want to make everything, the flavors of your story stand out. So because you have all of this beautiful, fanciful, sometimes meandering prose, and the idea is you do not want it to mess up your pacing. You want it to make sure that stained glass prose contains what is happening enough for the reader to follow along what's going on in the characters and the plot. So you kind of like spot you want to make the objects in it that need to be focused on easy to spot. Now, another thing to do and relevant to the story. Now, another thing you can do is use specificity. So you can often focus on a specific image in a scene and describe it in a clearer manner, be it a poodle with a pink collar who has some mud on its feet. something specific and interesting, and then build the prose around that, the flowery prose, so at least the readers have one clear image in their mind. Um, Another thing you can do is when you're using analogies, you want to try to get things that the reader will understand and in a very basic way. I mean, think of common experiences that you can describe in fanciful ways, and then you take that and use that to get a specific feeling down, and that because you don't want to be abstract. You don't. I think I read in one book that somebody was trying to use fancy prose, and the hearse trod through the wet marshes like a damp, wet head, and that made like it was bad. I mean, funny bad, but bad. And but if you can do feelings like the wind blew at me. It's such a storm, like I was in like a roller coaster rushing down that final loop. Feelings that the reader can relate to, and in a visceral yet easily thought up manner to get the feeling out of it. That will really help clarify that stained glass prose in a way that will help your story. And when you are working on prose, the advice I have to give you to help improve your craft is for Clear Window to work on that dialogue. Maybe write a play, write something that does not require a lot of descriptions in order to help you get used to that more minimalist approach if you really want to focus on Clear Window and improving that aspects of it. And if you really want to focus on improving your prose in respect to stained glass, I strongly recommend poetry. You get thematics, you get rhyming, you get something that is punchy, because oftentimes they're not long, and you have that narrative arc, which has a beginning and an end, and it's sometimes only 12 lines. Something that will help tighten up whatever kind of stained glass prose you have. So you're not going on for 5 paragraphs about the trees and the life cycle of some insect that isn't important to the plot. Because you really want to focus on having very pretty language, but also very focused on the story that you want to tell, so that the pacing can continue and that you can maintain the interest of the reader. So those are 2 bits of advice for helping improve your prose if you want to focus on one or the other. Now, like I said, it is a spectrum. So just writing in general will improve your prose, especially if part of your goal in writing is to maintain consistency. And doing short stories and flash fiction where you play around with different kinds of prose to let you feel comfortable writing different scenes for your book or novel or story is just a great way. It's practice. And if you find yourself in a place where you are stuck in your writing, call it writer's block or lack of focus, it is important to try out new things. And if you've never written stained glass poetry, if you've never written Clear Window type prose either, what you want to do is do that. And it's a new experience. It helps stimulate your brain, your creativity. And it's all valuable, And that's kind of what you want to do. And that's pretty much my basics on prose and the ways that you can support it in your writing. If you want to see more, you can watch more of my videos. You can follow me on Twitter at WritesKit. I have a Patreon if you wish to support me. Read my books, Crafting of Chess, Intelligence Block. Anything is good. Thank you for watching. Like and subscribe. And I hope you have a wonderful day.